Om Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Om Sada Shiva Samarambham Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Pada Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Om Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai Om Shanti 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 Om Bhadram Karne Bhishranuyama Devaha Bhadram Pashyemakshabharyajatraha Sthirairangaistushtvagam sastanubhihi Vyashema Devahitayadayuhu Swasti na Indro Vruddhashravaha Swasti na Pusha Vishwavedaha Swasti nastarksho arishtanemihi Swasti no Bruhaspatir dadhatu Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Yesterday, we saw it is the mind which alone causes the seeming duality, that projects the seeming duality in dream, and the same mind projects the seeming duality in the waking state also. So Gaudapacharya said in verse number 61 and 62, in two verses, he said, it is the dream, it is the mind. Dvayabhasam, the mind alone spins a seeming duality in the waking state through Maya. Just as the mind spins a seeming duality in dream through Maya. And 62nd verse, he said, the non-dual, the one mind alone is the seeming duality in the dream. The same one mind alone is the seeming duality in the waking state also. And it's very clear, there's no doubt about it. He said that. And later, and in almost 5 verses, 63, 4, 5, 6, and 7, in 5 verses, Gaudapacharya first gives the example of dream, giving the dream experience as an example, and he is going to extend the same teaching to the waking state also, the world experienced in the waking state also. Why so much of effort is taken? Because it is not that easy to say this world is as though. Because in all of us, because the very teaching is happening in the waking state. And there's a teacher teaching, there are people listening, the teaching is happening, communication is happening. And this is the only example. So all transactions are happening in the world. So it's very difficult to say this world is as though the world is really not there. It's not an easy job. Therefore, to drive home that subtlest fact of the world being not real, the world being not existent, Gaudapacharya first makes us understand the dream experience. So, in the 63rd verse we read, let us read again. 63rd verse, 63rd Karika, I'm reading now. Swapnadrik pracharan swapne dikshu vaidasha susthitan andajan svedajan vapi jivan pashyati yan sada. So the person who is experiencing the dream world, the person in dream, the dreamer, the experiencer obtaining in the dream world, dream state, moving about in dream, remaining in dream, constantly sees various beings, constantly experiences various beings where in dream. And the beings born of X, Andajan, Svedajan, and beings born of moisture, etc. Andajan, Svedajan, Jivan, Pashyati, Sada. In all the 10 quarters. Means how exactly the waker experiences in the waking state. For a waker, there is a east, west, north, south, etc. Similarly, for the person who is the experiencer obtaining in the dream state, for him also there is a dream world, and within the dream world there are 10 quarters, and he sees in all those 10 quarters, he sees beings of various beings, such as beings born of X, born of Master, etc. This is the literal meaning of the Karika number 63. Then in 64 he says, let us read here, Swapnadrik chittadrik chittadrishyaste Swapnadrik chittadrishyaste navidyante tataf prathak. Swapnadrik chittadrishyaste navidyante tataf prathak. Tatha tadrishyame vedam swapnadrik chittamishyate. Let us not forget, now Gaudapada Acharya only makes us understand the dream world, the dream experiencer. What is the dream world experienced in the dream state, and how the dreamer experiencer obtaining in the dream world is the world. So, Swapnadrik means the dreamer. Chittadrishyaha. Chittadrishyaha means they, all those beings, we have to connect with the previous verse also. The various beings, the person, the dreamer experiences various dream beings, such as beings born of X, beings born of March, etc. What are those beings? He says, they, all those beings are nothing but, those beings are nothing but Swapnadrik chittadrishyaha. Chittadrishyaha means objects of the dreamer's mind. Chitta means mind. Chittadrishyaha means objects of the dreamer's mind. The dream objects experienced by the dreamer in the dream state are nothing but objects of the dreamer's mind. The dreamer's mind. Swapnadrik chittadrishyaha. Swapnadrik means dreamer. Chittadrishyaha means objects of the mind. So, those things experienced by the dreamer are nothing but objects of the dreamer's mind. Therefore, what? Tataha pruthak na vidyante. Tataha, from the mind of the dreamer, those objects do not exist separately. I mean, they do not exist apart from that mind. They do not exist apart from that mind. Tataha pruthak na vidyante. Those objects are the objects of the dreamer's mind. Therefore, they do not exist apart from that mind, dreamer's mind. Tatha, similarly, the mind of the dreamer, tadrishyam eva idam. Tadrishyam eva idam. The mind of the dreamer is swapnadrik chittamishyate. Tadrishyam eva idam swapnadrik chittamishyate. So what he says, idam swapnadrik chittam, this mind of the dreamer, what is his mind of the dreamer? So objects experienced in the dream are nothing but objects of the dreamer's mind. What about the dreamer's mind? It is said the dreamer's mind, the mind of the dreamer also is accepted, ishyate means is accepted to be the object of the dreamer only. Okay, two things, the two objects. All the objects experienced in the dream are objects of the dreamer's mind. They do not exist apart from the mind, outside of the mind. Similarly, the mind of the dreamer itself is accepted to be the object of the dreamer. The mind is an object of experience. Mind also is object of experience. All the objects experienced in the mind, in dream, are objects of the dreamer's mind. They do not exist apart from that mind. And the mind of the dreamer also is an object of experience. Object is accepted to be the object of that dreamer only. So what? That mind also doesn't exist apart from the dreamer. This is the content of the 64th Karika. Then, in 65th Karika, I'm going to explain all of them. Charan Jagarite Jagrat Dikshuvai Dashasusthitan. Jagarite, okay, let me read the verse first. Charan Jagarite Jagrati. Charan Jagarite Jagrati. Dikshuvai Dashasusthitan. Charan Jagarite Jagrati. Dikshuvai Dashasusthitan. Andajan Svedajan Vapi. Andajan Svedajan Vapi. Jivan Pashyati Yan Sada. Charan Jagarite Jagrati. Dikshuvai Dashasusthitan. Andajan Svedajan Vapi. Jivan Pashyati Yan Sada. Charan Jagarite Jagrati. Dikshuvai Dashasusthitan. Andajan Svedajan Vapi. Jivan Pashyati Yan Sada. So in this 65th Karika, Gaudapada Acharya says, Jagarite means in the waking state. Charan means moving. Charan Jagarite means moving about in the waking state. Charan moving about. Jagarite in the waking state. Jagrat, the waker, Dashashu sthitan, Dashasu dikshu sthitan. Jagrat means the waker, sada, constantly, pashyati, moving about in the waking state, the waker constantly sees. Jagarite charan, dashasu dikshu sthitan, jagrat pashyati sada. The waker always constantly sees various beings in all the 10 quarters. What beings? Andajan, Svedajan, Vapi Jivan Pashyati. Exactly like the previous verse, earlier verse. So moving about in the waking state, the waker constantly sees various beings born of eggs, born of moisture, etc., existing in all the 10 quarters. So the verse 63rd verse, the 65th verse, same. Only thing is the state of experience is changed. That's all. Just as the dreamer sees in dream in all 10 quarters, beings always sees all beings, various beings such as beings born of eggs, born of moisture, etc., existing in all 10 quarters. So also the waker moving about in the waking state, the waker constantly sees various beings born of eggs, born of moisture, etc., existing in all the 10 quarters. Dashasu dikshu sthitan means existing in all 10 quarters. Jagrat, the waker, charan jagarite, moving about in the waking state, sada pashyati, constantly sees, andajan svedajan jivanapi, the various beings born of eggs, born of moisture, etc. Okay, what's the next verse? Jagrachitte kshaniyaste, Jagrachitte kshaniyaste, navidyante tataf pruthak. Jagrachitte kshaniyaste, navidyante tataf pruthak. Tatha tadrishyame vedam, jagrataschittamishhyate. Tatha tadrishyame vedam, jagrataschittamishhyate. Jagrachitte kshaniyaste, navidyante tataf pruthak. Tatha tadrishyame vedam, jagrataschittamishhyate. So Jagrat Chitta Ikshaniyaha te, Jagrat Chitta Ikshaniyaha te, na vidyante tataha pruthak. So what he says in this, those beings which are objects of the waker's mind, Jagrat Chitta means waker's mind. Ikshaniyaha means the objects experienced in the waker's mind. So, those beings which are objects of the waker's mind, those beings which experienced in the waker's mind are the objects of the waker's mind, tataha pruthak na vidyante, do not exist apart from that waker's mind. So the objects of the wakers, the beings which are experienced in the waking state, are objects of the waker's mind. Tataha te pruthak na vidyante, means they do not exist apart from that mind. Tatha, similarly, tadrishyameva idam, jagrataha chittam ishyate. The mind of the waker is accepted to be the object of that waker only. The two things, okay? There's a world of objects, the world of beings, which is experienced in the waking state, or the objects of the waker's mind. And therefore, those objects do not exist apart from that waker's mind. Similarly, not only just as the objects or beings experience the waking state, or the objects of the mind, which are non-separate from the mind, and the mind of the waker also is object of that waker only. The mind itself is an object of experience, object of that waker. What does it mean? The waker is distinct from the mind also. In both the verses, you can see in 4 verses. In the first 2 verses, he discussed about the dream. And second 2 verses, 66 and 67, he discussed about the 63rd and 4th. He discussed about the dream. 65th and 66th, he discussed about the waking state. So what he says is, the objects, the beings experienced in the dream state are the objects of the dreamer's mind. And the dreamer's mind itself is what? The object of the dreamer. Similarly, the beings experienced in the waking state are objects of the waker's mind. And the waker's mind itself is object of the waker. This is the content of the 4 karikas. What does he say in 67th karika? It is said, let us read the verse now. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Kim tadastiti nochyate. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Kim tadastiti nochyate. Lakshana shonyamubhayam tanmate naiva grihyate. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Kim tadastiti nochyate. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Kim tadastiti nochyate. Lakshana shonyamubhayam tanmate naiva grihyate. Ubhe hyanyonya drishyete. Kim tadastiti nochyate. Lakshana shonyamubhayam tanmate naiva grihyate. He says, Ubhe means both. Hi anyonya drishye. Anyonya drishye means Ubhe he indeed, Ubhe, both of them are anyonya drishye. Anyonya drishye means mutually perceived. Mutually perceived. Both of them are indeed mutually perceived. Ubhehi anyonya drishye. Te kim tadasti iti na uchyate. Kim tadasti. Kim tadasti iti na uchyate. Does either of them exist? Does either of them exist? No. Kim tadasti? The question comes. Kim tadasti? Does either of them exist? Na uchyate. Na. Na uchyate means no. Thus it is said. So both of them are indeed mutually perceived. The world of beings is perceived. Mind also is perceived. So both of them are indeed mutually perceived. Therefore, what? Does either of them exist? No. Thus it is said. Is the meaning of the first sentence. Lakshana shunyam. Lakshana shunyam means both of them are indefinable. Both of them are non-establishable. Lakshana shunyam ubhayam. Ubhayam means both. Lakshana shunya means both do not have definitions. Do not have definitions means what? Both of them are non-definable, non-establishable, indefinable. Ubhayam tanmatena eva grihyate. Ubhayam. Lakshana shunyam ubhayam. Lakshana shunyam ubhayam means what? Both of them are non-definable. Tanmatena eva grihyate means what? Is the each one, both of the both, each one is grasped because of the notion of the other only. Tanmatena eva grihyate. So each one is grasped because of the notion of the other only. This is the literal meaning. Let me make it very clear for you. We have seen the literal meaning of these 5 verses. What does Gaudapada? Just simply reading these verses like this, you cannot really understand everything clearly. Let me make it very clear. See, we know very well the 5 verses Gaudapada present to explain dream world. Thereby, by explaining the dream world, he also explains the waking world. Explaining means what? He says this waking world experienced in the world of beings, experienced in the waking state is mithya. So also as the world experienced the dream state is mithya. So let me make it very clear. In the first 2 verses, verse the Karika 63, the 63rd Karika and the 64th Karika, in both those Karikas, Gaudapada presents the analysis of the dream. In the first 2 Karikas here, that is first 2 means the 63rd and the 64th Karikas, Gaudapada presents the analysis of the dream from the standpoint of the experiencer obtaining in the dream state. Okay. See, when you analyze the dream, from whose standpoint you are analyzing the dream is very important. If you analyze the dream from the standpoint of the waker, your conclusion of dream will be different. If you analyze the dream from the standpoint of the dreamer, then the conclusion will be different. So here Gaudapada presents the analysis of the dream from the standpoint of the dreamer in those 2 Karikas, 63 and 64. Thereby, he beautifully brings to our notice 2 observations. And those observations will be a few observations, and those observations will be later on extended to the world experienced in the waking state also. So first of all, when you analyze the dream world, and from the standpoint of the dreamer, that analysis must help you observe few important things. And what you observe and extract, what the lesson you understand, and the same observations will be extended to the waking state also later on. So first he says, the person, the experiencer obtaining in dream state, I can say the dreamer in the dream state is part of the dream world. The dreamer in the dream state is a part of the dream. So the dreamer in the dream state, remaining as part of the dream, experiences everything in the dream world. So dreamer experiencer obtaining in dream state, remaining as part of the dream world, experiences everything in the dream world with a dream body and mind. See, every word I'm saying is important, okay? Must make a note of every word which comes to my mouth now. So dreamer experiencer obtaining in the dream state, remaining part of the dream world, experiences everything in the dream world with the dream body and mind. In the dream, all those objects, everything in that dream appears to be absolutely real. Everything in the dream appears to be absolutely real. Exactly like what is seen, what is found in the waking state. And we can imagine the dreamer in the dream may be traveling, may be having functions, may be celebrating things, may be conducting events. The dreamer in dream experiences varieties of the living beings. And when the dreamer in the dream experiences varieties of living beings, he looks at all those beings as different from oneself, different from himself. He sees the dream world of objects as different from himself. He thinks, I am an individual. There's a dream world which is experienced by me. Therefore, I am different from the dream world. I'm the experiencer of the dream world. I'm experiencer of the world. The world is different from me. This is the thing. This is the understanding of the dreamer in the dream world. So the dreamer experiencing varieties of the living beings in the dream world, he is beings different from himself. And the dreamer does not know that all those dream objects are nothing but projections of his mind. The dreamer does not know that all those dream objects are the projections of the dreamer's mind. The dreamer does not know that all those objects and all those beings experienced in the dream world are the projections of the dreamer's mind. Does not know. And there, just for the sake of example, Gaudapadacharya presents the different types of living beings. And the presentation of living beings, presentation of different types of living beings is based on the classification of beings in the Shastra. So Shastra presents the classification of beings differently, that all the living beings which are born of egg, all the living creatures which come breaking the shell of the egg are andajani. Andajaha or andajani, egg born. Then there are microorganisms which are born in a moisturous condition. They are Svedajaha. Andajaha, Svedajaha. Then there are beings born out of womb. There are beings which are born out of the breaking open the earth, they come out like plants, etc. The plants, Udbhijjaha, okay, Andajaha, Svedajaha, Udbhijjaha. Like we have different beings. Now, the dreamer, see what he says, just all these different varieties of beings. Egg born, moisture born, womb born, earth born, like all this. Now, the dreamer in dream experiences these objects, which he experiences them in his dream as different from himself. So when the dreamer is in still dream, he sees all those objects are different from oneself. And when he sees, he thinks he's the only one dreaming. He is the only one. So how many are there? Not he thinks. Though the dreamer is the only one person who is dreaming. See, how many people are dreaming? The person who is experiencing the dream world is only one. Though the dreamer is the only one dreamer who is dreaming, still he experiences variety of beings, and he sees all those beings, world of beings, as different from oneself, himself. And when the dreamer is experiencing those objects, varieties of beings and objects, the dreamer entertains a thought. See, to experience, there must be a thought. So this dreamer who is experiencing the varieties of beings and objects, the dreamer who is experiencing varieties of objects and beings entertains an internal thought. The dream thought. The dreamer experiencing various beings entertains an internal dream thought corresponding to the objects experienced. So the dreamer entertains an internal thought associated with the corresponding to the object experienced externally. There must be an internal thought corresponding to the object experienced externally. So the dreamer also has an internal thought corresponding to the object experienced in the externally, where dream, all in dream, okay? And then that external means what? The dream, in dream, there's an external world for the dreamer. Okay, the dreamer in dream has his own dream body mansions complex, and he has identity with the dream body mansions complex as a dream individual, and he looks at the dream world which he is experiencing as an external, the dream world which he is experiencing in dream as an external world. External from the standpoint of the dream body. The world experienced in dream state is external for the dreamer with respect to the dream body, or from the standpoint of the dream body mansions complex. And here is very important to understand, any experience involves definitely two components. And here in the dream also, there are two components. What are those two components? The experience presupposes two components. One is the internal thought and an external object. The external object and internal thought. So in the dream experience also involves two components, an external dream object and the internal dream thought, corresponding internal dream thought. When the person wakes up, okay, it's all like this. As long as he is in dream, for him, for the dreamer is an dream individual having his own dream body mansions complex, and he sees the dream world experience as an external world. And he also has what? The corresponding dream internal thought put into that external object. And when he wakes up from sleep, when he's no more in dream, is no more a dreamer. Now he sees the person, now he's a waker. After waking up from sleep, the waker discovers the fact that the object is unreal. Which object? The dream object is not real. The dream world of beings is not real. But when the person was in dream, both the object was real and the thought, respective thought of the object, internal thought and external object, the dream internal thought, dream external object were taken to be real. But on waking up from sleep as the waker, the dream internal thought is mithya. The dream mind is mithya. The dream external world of objects also is mithya. Dream mind, which alone projected the dream world of external world of objects, both are mithya. Even though mithya, they're not real. Mithya means what? Not real. But still, dreamer experienced the mind. Dreamer experienced the dream body mind. The dreamer experienced the dream external world also. Similarly, okay, we have to understand. And in the Gaudapacharya says drishyam, the word used by the drishyam means an object of perception. An object of knowledge is drishyam. Object is drishyam. And thought is meant by the word chittam. Thought is known as chittam. Our mind is known as chittam. Object is called a drishyam. So what is the dream world? Dream world is an object of experience of the dream mind. And the dream mind also is object of experience of the dreamer. So how many objects are there? Dream world, just drishyam is an object number 1. Chittam is also an object number 2. Okay. All those dream objects, the dream body, dream mind, and dream world of external world of objects. Okay. Dream, internal dream mind or dream thoughts, external dream world of objects, and a dream body. All the dream objects together constitute dream world. Swapna prapancha, the dream body mind sense complex. That means the dream mind, dream thoughts which constitute the dream mind and the dream external world together constitute dream world known as Swapna prapancha. I can say all the dream objects together constitute Swapna prapancha, and all the dream thoughts together constitute Swapna chittam. All the external world of dream objects constitute dream world. And all the dream thoughts together constitute dream mind. This is Swapna Chittam. And here, the dream world and the dream mind, this is dream world and the dream mind, both are projected by the only mind of the waker. The dream, all the dream internal thoughts which constitute the dream mind and all the objects which are experienced in the dream world. So the Swapna prapancha and the Swapna chittam. Swapna chitta means all the dream thoughts together constitute Swapna chittam, dream mind, and all the objects experienced the dream world constitute the Swapna prapancha. And this dreamer's mind, the dream mind and the dream world of objects, both of them are projections of the waker's mind. When does one know? Only after waking up from sleep, the waker recognizes, the waker understands. Only after waking up from sleep, the waker understands that really there was no such a world called dream world. There was no such a mind called dream mind. Why? The dream world of objects or the dream mind do not exist outside of, apart from, separate from the experiencer, observer. The dream world and the dream mind do not exist independent of, separate from, apart from the experiencer, observer. Okay, this much he discusses in the first two verses. Then later on, the following two karikas, 65th and 66th, Gaudapadacharya extends the same teaching. Okay, extends this, what the contents, to the same contents to the waking state. What does it mean? All the objects of the world experienced in the waking state, all the objects of the world experienced in the waking state are meant by the word Jagrat Drishyaha or Jagrat Drishyani. Drishyam means objects of the waking state, objects experienced in the waking state. And all those objects experienced in the waking state presuppose their corresponding thoughts in the waking state. So whatever object is experienced externally, that externally experienced object presupposes a corresponding internal thought. Okay, any object, every object experienced externally in external world presupposes the corresponding internal thought. If your door is experienced outside, already there must be door cognition in the mind, number thought. If there is experience of the cow outside, there must be cow cognition in the mind. Experiencing tree outside, there must be tree cognition in the mind. Experiencing a man outside, there must be man thought in the mind. It means the external, all the objects experienced in the external world presuppose the corresponding cognitions in them of thoughts in the mind. So corresponding thoughts. Therefore, all the objects of the world and their corresponding thoughts are, all of them are projections of the Maya. All of them are nothing but Maya's projections. So, I, the experiencer, I, the knower, I, the observer, am experiencing the mind, the thoughts which constitute the mind, and the internal thoughts I'm experiencing. External objects also I'm experiencing. Therefore, what? I, the observer, experiencer, am of both internal thoughts and the external corresponding objects. Therefore, not only the world, both the external world of objects and the internal thoughts which constitute the mind are all projected by Maya, projections of the only Maya. What is this Maya? Brahma Shakti, power of the reality. The only power of the only reality alone projects both external world of objects and the internal corresponding thoughts. So the internal mind and external world are all objects of experience. All the objects of experience are projected by one and the only Maya, the power of consciousness, power of the Turiyam. Turiya Shaktihi, Brahma Shaktihi, Atma Shaktihi, known as Maya alone, projects this both internal mind and external world of objects. So how we should say? If you shift your essence from the body, mind, sense complex, and you place your essence in pure consciousness existence, Satchidatma, then you can say what? I, the consciousness, am by my own Maya Shakti project both the external world and the internal mind obtaining in the waking state. The waking world, it means I project both the external world and the internal mind obtaining in the waking state. I project the waking world and the waking mind by my own power of Maya. So what? The mind also is an object of experience. So I, the experiencer, am distinct from the mind also. Therefore, what? I, the self, am consciousness implied by the term Atma, am absolutely free from the mind and the body. Therefore, what? Mind is also included in the object. Mind also, even though mind is subtle, the mind is experienced within the body, still the mind also is external to consciousness. Means what? External means as object of experience. So mind also is included as mithya object with the objective universe only. So, of course, the mind is very much useful, but mind is useful. Mind is used by me. Means I make use of the mind, but still mind is not included in me. So the mind also is what? Mind, even though mind is said to be internal from the standpoint of the external world, actually speaking, mind also is part of the objective universe experienced in the waking state. They say entirety of the objective universe means you must generously include your, not only your physical body, your mind, your physiological functions, your pranas, your powers, all of them must be included in the objective universe. So mind also being part of the external world experienced in the waking state, one cannot have total control over one's mind, as mind also is part of the objective universe, waking world. One cannot have total control over the mind. Just as one's body. What it means is, when Shastram says you are muktaha, you are absolutely free. When Shastram says you are absolutely free, you are nityaha, nitya muktaha, shuddhaha, buddhaha. When Shastram says you are absolutely free, you are ever free, you are timeless, etc., then what we should do? We should even exclude the mind from consciousness, which means mind should be included. Mind and the body should be included as part of the objective universe. If one has to claim one's own self as free, stating, I, the consciousness, am free. I am free. If a person has to claim moksha as one's own nature, I am free, if a person has to claim, then that I implies mere, formless, abstract, pure consciousness, implied by the term Turiya Atma or Brahman. So there is no substance at all other than consciousness of the term I. The substance of the substantive I is nothing but abstract, formless, pure consciousness implied by the term Atma. So what Gaudapacharya says, when you say I, what is the meaning of the word I? No, mind also should be included in the, even though mind is much subtlest matter. And mind also is object of experience. So mind should be included in the objective world. Mind must be counted as part of the objective universe is inclusive of the mind and the body. So if a person has to claim the fact that I itself am free, then the substance or the substantive I is nothing but pure, formless, abstract, all-pervasive, timeless consciousness implied by the term Atma. So what is said here? If you have to say, I am free, I am nitya muktaha, muktoham, amuktaha asmi. But to say, I am free means definitely in that expression, I am free, that I should not include the mind and the body. So, of course, the mind is blessed. You are blessed with the mind. The mind is the blessing in disguise. Okay, the mind is, human being is blessed with this unique mind to make use of it, ultimately to claim one's own glorious nature. The human being is blessed with this unique mind to make use of the mind to claim one's own glorious nature, not to depend upon the mind for one's moksha. Very big difference, okay? Bhagavan has blessed a human being with the unique mind in order to make use of the mind to claim one's glorious nature of freedom. But it is but not at all to depend upon the mind for one's total freedom. Not to depend, okay? Not to depend on the mind for total freedom. There's a big difference. Making use of the mind to claim one's glorious nature is, one's essential nature is different from depending on the mind for one's freedom. So Gaudapada Acharya consciously, thoughtfully, here gives us a message. What is that? Mind is subtlest matter which should be included in the objective material world. It should not be included at all as the meaning of the word I, the first person singular pronoun I. Mind should not be included in the substance of the substantive I. Now, of course, the body is included in the meaning of the word I. The mind and the body are included in the meaning of the word I only for the purpose of transacting in this world. Okay? The body and the mind should be included as the meaning of the word I only for the purpose of transacting in this world. But when a person has to have one's own self-image, a person has to have one's own self-image. Okay, to have one's own self-image, definitely one must exclude the body and mind as part of the objective universe. One should not include the body and mind in the meaning of the word I. And then this much is the content of the 4 karikas. In the 67th karika, Gaudapada Acharya says, see, when the mind becomes functional, when the mind is active, when the mind rises, okay, in deep sleep state, mind remains dissolved. When the mind remains resolved and passive in deep sleep state, along with the mind, the world also resolves. World also remains resolved. The world also dissolves. Again, when the mind rises, when the mind becomes functional, active, the mind rises. Along with the mind, the external world also rises. Therefore, the rising of the world and the dissolution of the world happens simultaneously along with the rising and the resolution of the mind, which means the mind and the world simultaneously, together they rise, together they resolve. It is impossible for us to prove the existence of the world without the mind. It is impossible for us to prove the existence of the mind without the world. Is it clear? You cannot, it is impossible to prove the existence of the world without the mind. It's impossible to prove the existence of the mind without the world. Which means mind and the world are mutually dependent on each other for proving their existence. But even then, please make note, mind and the world can prove their existence mutually only when they have the blessing of consciousness. Okay? Mind proves the existence of the world, and the world proves the existence of the mind, which means it is one cannot prove the existence of the one without the other, because both the world and the mind exist together, rise together, resolve together, exist together. Rising is together, existence is together, and resolution also is together. So, we cannot prove at all. It is impossible. It is not provable at all. What? The mind and the world. Okay. I mean, they cannot exist independent of each other. So if the mind is if the waking state of the mind, if there is waking state of the mind, then the external world is experienced. The mind is totally functional. The mind is totally active. The mind is in the waking state. Then the external world is experienced. If the mind is partially awake, partially functional, and partially asleep, the mind is partially functional, partially asleep, then there is experience of the dream world possible. See, the waking state, mind functions along with the sense organs. When the mind is said to be fully active. When the mind functions along with sense organs, being active totally, then the external world is experienced. When the mind functions partially without the association with sense organs, then the mind, that is experience of the dream world is possible. But when the mind is totally passive, and the mind is totally passive, non-functional, totally non-functional, fully asleep, then there's no experience of the world possible. No world is experienced. So fully functional mind, semi-functional mind, non-functional mind. And the mind is fully functional, external world is, waking world is experienced. And the mind is semi-functional, without association, without any association with the sense organs. In the partial, when the mind is partially functional, the dream world is experienced. When the mind is non-functional, fully asleep, no world is experienced. So, that is why when somebody tries, okay, when during the practice of meditation, when a person tries to resolve, okay, when the person is constantly making efforts in the meditation to remove, the person in meditation is making efforts to remove all the objects. Falls asleep sometimes. Even the effort to remove all the objects in meditation contributes for sleep. It results in sleep. Why? Because, please remember, if the mind has to be awake, if awake means what? If the mind must be functional, awake, then it must have an object. If the mind has to be awake, it requires an object, or at least an imaginary object for its existence. Because mind needs to lean on something to be alert, to be awake. The no object means nothing is that for the mind to hold on to, there'll be sleep. Understand now? Mind requires definitely an object, at least a visualized object for its existence. If there's no object, then mind will fall asleep. So if a person makes efforts to remove all the objects in sleep, in terms of anatma, and it will result in sleep only. So what Gadupacharya wants to say, please understand, mind is dependent on the world, and the world is dependent on the mind. And both mind and world together are dependent on consciousness. See, all our sense organs, our seeing power, our hearing power, our power of smelling, our power of taste, power of touch, all these powers, are proved by their respective objects. It means the sense organ The sense power proves the existence of the sense object. Sense power alone proves the existence of the sense object. Sense powers prove the existence of the sense objects. Now, sense objects prove the existence of the sense powers. Okay. If there's no light at all, but both are mutually, okay. Sense powers prove the existence of the sense objects, and sense objects prove the existence of the sense powers. So Gaudapadacharya, that we saw that one question was asked. What is, Gaudapadacharya says, what is that one which proves the which one? Does the world prove the existence of the mind? Does the mind prove the existence of the world? In fact, both are dependent on each other. Mutually, they are dependent. Therefore, it is not possible to say that mind proves the existence of the world or world proves the existence of the mind. Both prove the existence of each other. Which means, prove means what? Independently. If the mind is, without the mind, existence of the world cannot be proved at all. Without the world, mind, existence of the mind cannot be proved at all. Therefore, it is said mind and the world are, okay, it's impossible to prove the existence of the world and the mind independently. Means what? Both cannot be proved independently. So one becomes proved because of the other. Which means mind does not have proof for its independent existence. World does not have proof for its independent existence. And both become proofs for the existence of each other. Both are dependent. Therefore, if mind is dependent, earth is dependent, the objective world is dependent, then the dependent ones need a substratum, adhishtanam. It means, and what is that? It is both mind and the world do not have independent existence of their own. They both are lent existence. So we say, I, the consciousness, am lending existence to the mithya mind and the mithya world. And for me, I need not do anything to end existence. I, the consciousness, am of the nature of knowing, illumining, by my mere presence, by the mere presence of consciousness. The world, mind borrows existence, and thereby world also borrows its existence. When I do not know, okay, when there is ignorance of what I is, then helplessly the mind also is mistaken to be the meaning of the word I. This I sense is identified with the mind. I sense is identified with the mind. The mind is mistaken to be the self. So, mind is instrument which I operate. So, I am the experiencer of the mind, observer of the mind, and I'm also the user of the mind. Therefore, what? I, the user, I, the experiencer, I, the observer of the mind, am different from the mind. Therefore, it is possible for me to make use of it or to ignore it, to drop it. But in ignorance, if I sense is identified with the mind, if I is identified with the mind, then what happens? Then the person becomes lost in the mind. That is why it is said, Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayo. It's a beautiful sentence. You would have heard me reciting this sentence many times. You would have heard me before also. Because anybody should, because it's an amazing sentence. It's a simple sentence. Many people quote this, but it reveals a fact. And this is from the Amrita Bindu Upanishad. There's a small Upanishad called Amrita Bindu Upanishad. And this sentence comes, Manayeva manushyanam karanam bandhamokshayoho. It is the mind which alone causes the bondage. It is the mind which alone causes the liberation. What does it mean? If the mind is included as the meaning of the word I, it causes bondage. If the mind is excluded from the I, the mind is understood as the part of the mithya objective universe, then there is freedom. Because in inclusion, in mind is included in the I, the mind becomes, then all the limitations of the mind becomes what? Limitations of the I. The mind has heaviness. Mind has, heaviness means what? Not physical heaviness. Mind has the heaviness of the loaded ideas. Mind is burdened. Then what happens? The whole life becomes a huge, big burden. It is easy to handle the external situations objectively. It is very easy to handle the external situations objectively by keeping oneself away from them intellectually. But what happens? The mind itself is a problem. Okay, the mind itself is a problem. Then handling the external situations objectively is not possible. Therefore, what I want to say is, mind is something physically inseparable from the consciousness. So mind is inseparable from consciousness physically, But cognitively, it can be, consciousness can be distinguished. So wherever the person is, there the mind is. Mind follows the person like the how when a person walks, the shadow follows the person, so also the mind follows. Therefore, it is very, very important for one to become objective towards one's own mind. In fact, there's no greater achievement than becoming objective towards one's own mind. See, being objective towards the external world may be easier, but becoming objective towards one's own mind is very difficult. And being objective towards one's own mind means physically you can't distance the mind, but intellectually, cognitively, one has to distinguish oneself, and that way one must be objective towards one's mind. That is how one need not attain freedom, one can claim one's freedom. Because already there is one's own nature. So I'll stop here. I completed those verses. The new lesson will start on Monday.
Swamiji?
Yeah. Yes, Swamiji.
Swamiji, on Monday we didn't have a class, so will we have a class tomorrow?
Tomorrow, Swamiji, is Chaturdashi, Krishna Chaturdashi Tithi. Before this Ashada Amavasya, very special Amavasya day after for us. So, unfortunately, I already fixed the puja for tomorrow. Maybe I'm doing a Chandi part tomorrow, which I start at 2:30. It will go on for 3-4 hours of chanting. I would be happy to, I would have loved to have done it, definitely, but I already fixed with the people. I didn't know that earlier. So.
Okay, Swamiji, thank you. I have a small question, Swamiji, please.
Yeah.
All over the last karikas that you have been teaching, Panoli translates the word chitta as consciousness. Why is that?
Usually, Swamiji, to some places the word chitta means consciousness, but here I do not know how because we have to take it as mind, because the whole teaching is for us to distinguish the mind. Maybe, I don't know, but the word chittam, some context, it does mean consciousness also. But in these verses, Swamiji, the word chittam is used in the sense of mind only. Let me look into it and get back to Swamiji, because I didn't read really Panology's book. Let me go, because I've got a copy. Naranaji gave me long ago. Let me look into it and get back to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Maybe there he includes the mind and the object, objects, I think. If we take it as consciousness, then we explain his words to be difficult, Swamiji. I didn't read Panology's book. And sometimes, Swamiji, in translations, they give the literal translations. There, the reflected, manifest consciousness also is taken as chittam. The manifest consciousness implies the mind. He must have used that sense, Swamiji. The word chittam implies sometimes manifest consciousness, which implies mind. So the literally, that again, that needs to be explained. So was this class very clear today?
Very clear, Swamiji. Thank you.
So when do I see you all? On Tuesday then?
On Monday, Swamiji. We meet again on Monday.
I fixed this puja. If I didn't fix it earlier, then I would definitely, I would have fixed the puja. And so if I knew, then I didn't know.
Yeah.
I announced people.
We will resume on Monday, Swamiji.
Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om.